بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. الحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن اهتدى بهداه. Jazakum khair everyone for joining us today. We are so excited to have our special guest today. First of all, for those who do not know me, my name is Mohamed Samurai. I am a pediatric ophthalmologist and adult strabismus specialist. We used to live in Columbia, Missouri for the past 4 years before moving recently to Richmond, Virginia, where I'm currently working at the VCU, Virginia Commonwealth University. I am delighted to know our guest today, Dr. Owais Abdul-Kafi. He is very well friend of our family and his family as well. What makes him very special to fit this very interesting and important topic is that first, besides his medical degree, and he's currently the cardiology fellow at the University of Illinois in Chicago, he has very unique qualifications to handle this topic very effectively. First, he used to run his family business when he was in med school. In addition, he had a master's degree in health economics from the University of Missouri, besides his med school degree. And lastly, he, mashallah, grew up in a family with very solid Islamic knowledge and tarbiyah, mashallah. So this made him qualified in both financial perspective and from halal point of view, inshallah. He is also joined by his great father, who is the senior scholar in the Islamic Center of Columbia, Missouri, Sheikh Shakir Hamoudi, who is also available with us today and may also provide some Sharia perspective inputs if we need to go any further advanced questions for Dr. Owais. I would encourage everyone to keep their questions handy, so we're gonna have interactive Q&A session at the end. I will try to deliver the questions in organized fashion. We also allow you to unmute yourself at the end of the presentation to have your questions directly to Dr. Owais. Dr. Owais, without further ado, Jazakallah khair, go ahead, but we'll have a request from you. Despite our medical degrees, I am like in the kindergarten level in this finances topic. So take it step by step for someone who has no knowledge at all about this thing. So take it easy and go ahead.
Yeah, inshallah. Jazakallah khair for inviting me. It's been a while since I've been in Colombia, but alhamdulillah, it's good that I was able to talk on this topic. I have to just briefly my background. I think most of you know who I am. I went to the University of Missouri in Columbia for undergrad and medical school. And then since then, I've been in Chicago doing residency and then cardiology fellowship. And alhamdulillah, now I got accepted to interventional fellowship starting in 2023. So inshallah, that's in my future. I have to start by saying, I'm not a financial professional by any means. I can't give you tax advice. I can't give you like professional advice on any of these things, but these are kind of just general topics of how we as a Muslim community in the US, I feel like a lot of us don't know about these topics, but there obviously are some benefits that we can get out of the system that we live in. And I feel like a lot of Muslims that I knew growing up, they didn't really take advantage of the financial system to their benefit. And I think that probably makes the Muslim community less strong in the United States if we don't take advantage of the system. Obviously, there are, haram aspects of the system that we should avoid, but there are obviously other halal aspects that we should, embrace and we should use to our advantage because everyone else in the US is using the system to their advantage. So just a brief outline, first I'll start with why do we need a financial plan? I'll start very briefly with a little bit of financial literacy. A lot of people ask, should I just hire an accountant or a financial planner to take care of these things? For me, I'll go through a few of the different products and services that are generally available to everyone in the US. I'm not really going to talk about student loans that much. I have one slide on student loans because I think most of the people in this audience don't have student loans. I grew up in the US and I couldn't afford to go to medical school without student loans, but there are ways to pay them off or to have them forgiven in the US, and I'll just kind of briefly touch on them. There's a few questions about insurance options. This is more geared towards like medical professionals. Which I'm not sure the audience, most of us are medical professionals or not, but I'll just very briefly touch on that as well. And then we'll go through in detail, or not in detail, but in more details about creating a financial plan for college savings, especially if you have kids and you want to save for college for them, for retirement, and then for general like savings. And then how do you manage this day to day? And then I have a few slides on Zakat and tax implications. I'm not an expert in either of these topics, but I think I took the kind of most agreed upon opinions for, especially when it comes to Zakat, about how do you pay Zakat for these different things. And tax implications, there are a few ways to be a little bit more tax savvy when it comes to these things. So I'll just briefly touch on those. And then questions, if you have, I may not be able to answer them, but it's nice to see what kind of questions people have. And if I'm able to answer them, then alhamdulillah, that's good. Okay, so why do I need a financial plan? Well, it helps you achieve your goals. If you want to, this slide was more geared toward medical professionals, but if you want to retire at age 45 as a physician, you could probably start working at 30 maybe, and you want to retire at 45 and you want to do something other than medicine, you probably could if you kind of play the system right. But so there are some physicians, and I know some of them even working, and they're age 75 and even 78. We have an attending in our hospital, he's 78, he's still practicing cardiology, but he loves what he does and he wants to do it. But then there's other people that are working at age 65 or 70 because they have to, because they have bills, loans, all kinds of stuff that they just didn't manage their financial plan right through life. And they ended up in a situation where they're still working at age 65 or 70 because they have to, which I hope none of us ends up in that kind of situation. There's this thing, it's called the FIRE movement, which I'm sure some of you have heard of. It's called Financial Independence, Retire Early. This is more of a movement, kind of started probably in the last 10, 15 years among millennials who value financial independence. These are people who say they're young people who maybe they get their first job at age 25 or 23, and they work very, very hard. They take on extra hours, and they save like they live very frugally, and they save almost everything that they earn for 10 or 15 years, and then they save it, they invest it in the stock market or whatever, and their goal is to just not work and just retire at age like 40 or 45, and then not work the rest of their life. This, if you want to do that, you probably could. You could probably, as I mentioned, apply to physicians. Financial independence, when it comes to physicians, not necessarily means you can quit your job, but it does give you more options. I'm sure all of us physicians here have seen like the tremendous change in healthcare in the US over the last 10, 15 years. I noticed it myself, even though I'm very young. There's a whole lot of middle management now in medicine. There's a whole lot more of MBAs and other kind of management bulk that they don't take care of patients. They create rules that may not make too much sense from a physician standpoint. And there is some early research happening now that says that there are some physicians who are actually retiring early because they don't want to deal with all this extra kind of overhead infrastructure that the healthcare financial complex has turned into. And so if you are financially independent on your own, you probably have less pressure to conform to some of these different management styles, different contracts. The contract changes, you might be able to argue and kind of argue for a better contract for yourself because you are already financially independent. And you can say, okay, well, if you don't do this for me, then I don't have to work for you. I can go work for someone else. So it gives you more independence and ability to negotiate your contract better if you are financially independent. And this probably applies to all the careers as well. But I just noticed in myself, like, the medicine has changed significantly over the last few years. Okay, so we'll talk about financial literacy. You know, we are good physicians. We do the best for our patients. We spend a lot of time getting where we are, but let's see, I think, can you hear me?
Yes. Yes. Sorry.
Okay. And you know, a rheumatologist can't do a coronary angiogram. So you need to get yourself, you know, a little bit more knowledgeable in this field if you want to navigate it. It's a complicated system, probably as complicated as medicine. It has so many different areas that, you know, you need to be aware of them so that you can navigate them. You have to spend extra time learning about the system. If you don't know the rules, you're not going to be able to win. And you can hire a professional to teach you how to do it, but and I'll advise you later why this is the case. Don't hire a professional just to do it for you, because then you may not have as much control over what's happening. Okay, let's see. Financial assets. So we'll talk a little bit just very briefly. So a stock is a certificate of ownership in a company, and you can get returns by the value of the stock can change. The value of the stock can go up and down. There are the majority of stocks, the majority of companies, they pay dividends, which are paid as like a proportion of the profits. You don't have any, and they pay those kind of on a quarterly or sometimes annual basis. You don't have any value committed in the stock until you sell the asset. So even if the value goes down, as long as you still hold that certificate in your name, you know, nothing is set in stone until you sell it. Okay, and if the set value goes up, again, nothing is set in stone until you sell it, and you actually get the money for it.
Dr. Owais, what's the definition of dividends?
A dividend is a proportion. It's like a proportion of the profit that the company makes. So, for example, let's say Microsoft, the corporation, they make, I don't know, let's say they make $1 billion in profit, and in this quarter, for example, and they decide to spend 75% of it, of that profit, going back to research and development and making products, et cetera, and they have $250 million left.
Voice as if the sound is not as high.
Not clear.
Yeah, now it's clear.
Now it's clear.
Yes.
Okay, so you know they have a specific amount of money that they will.
Sorry, Owais, I asked you to mute himself. I'm sorry. Unmute.
Okay.
Yep. Sorry.
Okay, so let's say, you know, I'll go back. Let's say Microsoft has like $1 billion in profits that they made this quarter, okay? And they decide to spend 75% of it going to research and development and other things, making new products, et cetera. And so they're left with 250 million. And so let's say they have 250 million shares outstanding. And so the $250 million divided by 250 million shares, that means if you own one share of this company, you will get $1 as a dividend. You know, it's like, you know, they made this much profit this year, and this is how much they will share with you as a shareholder of the company. If they lost money, they probably won't give you any dividends. Although some companies still give dividends even if they lost. And if they earned a whole lot more money, some companies choose to invest the rest of it in more research and development, and some companies choose to increase the amount of stocks that the amount of dividends that they give. So it's kind of each company, each board decides on how much they will give how much the dividends they will give per share. It's kind of like it's a share of the profit of the company. A bond is a certificate of debt in a company or a government. Usually these are, you know, you buy a bond and then you get back a fixed return, like a fixed percent. Like I buy this bond and I get back 3% per year, for example. So this is considered haram because, you know, you have kind of a fixed return that's coming back to you every year, which is supposed to be guaranteed. Usually the government bonds, they are more guaranteed than the other company, like corporate bonds. There is a probability that you will lose all of it. So you could lose your entire bond that you paid if the company or the government, for example, declares bankruptcy, or there's some restructuring that happens. Usually the bond holders are the last ones to get any money if there's, for example, a company declares bankruptcy. And so there is a, there is a chance that you could lose all of it. But again, there's different grades in bonds. There's like A+, which is usually like treasury bonds, like US federal government treasury bonds. And then there's like B, C, et cetera, and then all the way down to junk bonds. But again, bonds in general are haram because they pay a fixed percentage return. Certificate of deposit is a different kind. It's like a bank compiles some stocks and bonds together, and you give them money, and they tell you that I'm going to give you a specific percentage in return. Again, the bank is not there for your benefit. The bank is there for their own benefit, right? So they're planning on making much more return than you are. And so in general, a certificate of deposit is not a good idea, even if you take the halal or haram aspect away from it. It's usually less risky than a bond because it's a compilation of a bunch of bonds and stocks together. And again, this is like haram because of fixed return. Right? Okay, a mutual fund is, you have a financial company that compiles many stocks and or bonds together. And it's a way of kind of distributing the risk. So instead of investing in one company, like investing only in Microsoft, for example, I'm going to invest in, all the companies that fall in that category, or all the companies in the entire market. So again, it's a way of, not putting all your eggs in one basket. And so a financial company compiles all of them together. You buy a share of the whole fund, and then you get a share of the return. If the stock prices or the underlying asset value goes up, then your value of your mutual fund will go up. If the companies pay dividends to the mutual fund, because the mutual fund holds stocks, if the companies, all of them, pay dividends to the mutual fund, then that mutual fund will share that dividend with you as a shareholder of the mutual fund. Okay. Lots of different ways they structure their fees. There's transaction fees, annual fees, all kinds of things. But the average, kind of overall fee for a mutual fund in the US is 0.74% per year. So this is a fee that they take on how much money that you are holding in that fund. So let's say you have $10,000 in this mutual fund, you're going to be paying $74 per year, for example. This is the 0.74. But again, each fund is different. And each fund charges different fees. There's actively managed funds, which there's like a manager that selects which stocks to buy and sell, and they sometimes buy and sell them on a day-to-day basis. These are considered actively managed. So these are, financial advisors or managers that look at the market, and this is their day-to-day job. They look at the market and they decide, oh, this company I think will go up, so I'm going to buy more in this company. I think this company is going to go down, so I'm going to sell this stocks that I have in this company, et cetera, et cetera. But overall, kind of their job is to make as much profit as possible for the mutual fund, for their fund holders, right? Passively managed funds are less expensive because the mutual fund decides that, I'm going to target all the tech companies, for example, and I'm not going to care about, well, they care a little bit, but I'm not going to have day-to-day management of buying and selling stocks and companies. I'm just going to say, this is the start of the year. These are the companies that I'm going to invest in, and that's it. I'm not going to change them too much throughout the year. But again, you don't have as many managers needing for a passively managed fund, and so the costs are less, usually. You can target different sectors. So for example, you can say, I want to buy all the tech stocks, for example. I want to buy all the healthcare stocks. I want to buy all the oil stocks, for example. You can have funds that target specific sectors, or you can have even different, I want to buy all the Islamic companies, or I want to buy all the companies that are in Argentina, for example, if you want that. Or they can be funds targeting the whole market. They're priced once per day, and they usually have a minimal investing to start. So usually like $1,000 or $3,000. Usually they give you lower fees if you have much bigger accounts. Like if you have 100,000, you probably get a lower fee than if you only have $1,000 in it. And as I mentioned earlier, the returns you get from the mutual fund are, they compile all the dividends together, the capital gains that are realized by the stocks and bonds and assets, and then they divide it among all the holders. You have to be careful with mutual funds for capital gains. Capital gain is basically when you buy an asset and you sell it, the gain, the difference between the selling price and the buying price is the capital gain. And so if you hold an asset for more than 1 year, that's considered a long-term capital gain, which means that you will be taxed at a much lower tax rate than if you sold it within less than 1 year. So let's say you buy a Microsoft stock, for example, for $100 today, and you sold it a year from now or more than a year from now for $110. Your gain is $10. So you're going to be taxed because it's been more than 1 year that you held it. You'll be taxed, the long-term capital gain rate for the $10, which, in most people, if their income is low, then that capital tax rate is 0%. It's like 0%, 15%, or 20%. But if you sold it like next week and you only held it for 7 days, less than a year, then it will be taxed as though it's your regular income. So it's going to be taxed as though you worked, regular income tax. So whatever tax bracket you fall into, that's the tax rate you're going to pay for this extra profit that you got. Any questions on this? Okay, I'll go on to the next one, which is an ETF. This is a relatively newer than a mutual fund. This is called an exchange traded fund. So this is similar to a mutual fund, but there's two important differences. One is you can buy and sell these on an exchange. So you can, the price of it will change constantly. Every second there's a different price based on the market. And the capital gains on the exchange traded funds generally only occurs when you sell the ETF. So for example, if you go back to the mutual fund, let's say you have a mutual fund that has, let's say 5 companies in it, 5 different stocks in it. And the manager decided that they will sell one of the stocks and buy a different one. Okay. So when they sell it, and let's say they incurred short-term capital gains tax because they've only held that company for less than 1 year, then you as a holder of that mutual fund are going to pay short-term capital gains tax because the fund sold a company that they only held for less than a year. If they sold a company and they held it for more than a year, then you as a holder of the mutual fund will incur long-term capital gains tax, but it's realized tax. Whereas with the ETF, because it's treated as though it's like a stock that's traded on an exchange, you will only pay taxes when you sell the asset. So if you yourself hold it for 5 years, you're only going to be paying long-term capital gains tax on it. If you hold it for less than a year, you're going to be paying short-term capital gains tax. But it doesn't matter if the fund itself changed, if the fund manager decided to buy and sell companies within it, you won't incur that short-term or long-term capital gains tax until you sell it. Does that make sense? Okay, so again, capital gains only occurs when you sell the ETF in general. If there are dividends that come in through the year or the time that you are holding this ETF, then you will be taxed for the dividends, but dividends are taxed as regular income for the same, if it's a mutual fund or if it's an ETF. Many different sectors for ETFs. Some are actively managed, some are passively managed. Generally, because there's lower cost than mutual funds. So average fees is 0.44 across the market for all the ETFs. Okay. Minimum price, there's no like $1,000 minimum investment, to buy this ETF. Minimum price is the cost of the ETF. There's typically no minimum number of shares you have to buy for most of them. So I think I don't have, there's a diagram here. But there's different philosophies for mutual funds and ETFs. So some of them are equity funds. These are only invested in stocks. Some of them are fixed income funds, which are fully invested in bonds. And some of them are balanced, which are invested in both. And there's different categories that are popular. Like some of them are like global, which means they target like, foreign markets. Some of them target sectors or different specialty funds. Some of them target index funds, which means they track the Dow or they track the S&P 500 and they don't deviate from that. So if you buy, for example, if you buy the S&P 500 fund from one of the companies, like Vanguard, for example, then, whatever the S&P 500 does, which is a compilation of 500 companies, then that's where your fund is going to be. There's like some of them that target like Islamic companies or they're halal companies. Some of them target ethical or more green funds, etc. Green energy and new energy and these kind of things. There's lots of categories of them. So now those are kind of the things that you can buy, but how do you buy them? So the different investing products. So one of them is a general brokerage account. This one, anyone can open, you can open it with any of these companies. There's so many of them, but the most common ones are Vanguard, Fidelity, and Schwab. You can buy stocks, bonds, ETFs. You can buy like mutual funds, crypto. You can buy all kinds of assets through your general brokerage account. Generally, a lot of these, especially the bigger companies, there's no fees or very low fees to buy the funds from them. But you have to keep in mind, you're going to pay full taxes on all the returns. So if let's say you buy an ETF or you buy a mutual fund, and they get you a dividend at the end of the year, and they have capital gains at the end of the year, all that stuff will be added into your taxes. So, they will give you a tax form and you'll use it when you file your taxes, and it will increase the amount of taxes that you pay. Again, as I mentioned, dividends, you're going to be added to your income tax, state and federal. Interest, if you get interest, is going to be added to your income tax. Short-term capital gains added to your income tax, and long-term capital gains, you're going to pay the lower long-term capital gains tax, usually lower than your short-term like income tax. Then we'll talk a little bit about individual retirement accounts. There's two types. There's traditional and Roth. So this is kind of started as a way to encourage a population to save for retirement. Generally, you can have $6,000 per individual per year. If you're married, you can do $12,000 for both together. You can invest in anything. You can invest in stocks, bonds. You can put it in a savings account, an ETF. You can invest in like rental property. If you want to go that route, you can put your IRA in a rental property, and then you get rent that's tax-free, basically. The reason these are tax advantaged is because, these are tax advantaged accounts, but I'll talk a little bit about the differences between the two. So a traditional IRA, when you put that $6,000 in your traditional IRA, you can deduct it from your income that year. So let's say your income this year was $50,000, for example, and you put $6,000 in a traditional IRA, and you put another $6,000 for your wife or your husband in a traditional IRA. So instead of paying income tax on $50,000, you pay income tax on $38,000 because you can deduct the 12. Okay. But the issue is when you withdraw it, when you retire and you start withdrawing from your traditional IRA, you will be paying income taxes at the tax rate that you are in when you turn, whatever your retirement age is, which in general is 59.5. You can start withdrawing money from your traditional or Roth IRA. Then whatever your income tax is when you're 59.5 or whenever you start withdrawing it, then you'll pay income tax at the tax rate that you are in at that time. Okay. But there's a caveat to this. If you and your spouse are both covered by a retirement plan at work, like let's say your work offers you a 401k or a 403b or some other retirement plan, then guess what? You can no longer deduct $6,000 from your income. So you have to make sure if you're putting money into a traditional IRA, you have to make sure that you're able to deduct that from your income. Otherwise, the tax advantages kind of melt away, right? You won't get tax advantage when you put the money in, and you won't get tax advantage when you take the money out later. It's going to be like the same. Okay. If one of you is covered, the other one is not. There's like different rules about this. I won't go into all the rules, but if there's different rules about how high your income can be, and for you to be able to deduct the money. You, in general, can't withdraw it unless you have severe hardship. If you're buying your first home, you can take $10,000 out of it. If if you have like a severe illness or to pay for college. But in general, there's about 10% penalty plus all the taxes that you would have paid if you want to withdraw something early from your traditional IRA. Okay. Even if your spouse doesn't work, you can deposit money into their traditional IRA without them working. But in general, you have to have what's called earned income in order to be able to deposit money into your traditional IRA or Roth IRA. So for example, let's say you didn't work this year and you didn't have any W-2 income or 1099 income that you file for, then you're not going to be able to put any money into your IRA. Only if you have earned income, which is again W-2 or 1099. Let's say you have a small business or something, or you're a freelancer, then you can put as much money as up to $6,000 if you earn that much. Let's say you're like 50 years old and you're not working, but you got $10,000 in return from a dividend because you own the stock of a company. Well, that dividend cannot be used to put money into your IRA, even though you earned more than $6,000 that year. You can't use that money because that's not considered earned income. Earned income is only you actually work for the money. So you have to, work in your job, or you have a business or something and you got money from that business. Okay. And you can start withdrawing at age 59 and a half. And for a traditional IRA, you must start withdrawing at the age of 72. So there's this required minimum distribution that you have to start withdrawing some money at the age of 72 because, the government wants to collect on taxes. Because when you withdraw money, then, you'll start paying taxes, right, on the money you withdraw. Okay, so talking a little bit about a Roth IRA. So this one is you deposit after-tax funds, and then you have tax-free growth. So you're not going to get a deduction when you put the money in this year, but when you withdraw it, however much it grows, over the next 20 or 30 or 40 years sometimes, then at that time you withdraw it fully tax-free. It's just tax-free money. The caveat is most physicians, so if your income is more than 200,000, then you don't get a deduction for a traditional IRA, because of our income limits. So this is our only option for us, but there's also income limits for the Roth. And so what you end up doing is you put the money in a traditional IRA and then you use this loophole. It's not a loophole, it's part of the law. It's called a backdoor Roth. And you basically transfer the money to your Roth at the same time. So you put the money in the traditional IRA and the next day you transfer, then you can have tax-free growth. You're not going to get any kind of tax advantages or deductions this year when you put the money in there. But that's the only way. If your income is more than 200,000, that's the only way to put money in your Roth IRA is to kind of roll it over from a traditional IRA. Same limits, 6,000 per year. If you're more than 50, you can do 7,000, as long as you have earned income. And then you can also deposit the same amount for your spouse, even if your spouse doesn't work. Okay, this one does not have a required minimum distribution. You can leave it in the account as long as you want. I mean, you can even, your kids can inherit your account. And then I'll talk about that a little bit later. But if you have money in the Roth IRA, then you can leave it in as long as you want. And you can withdraw the principal amount that you deposited at any time without penalty. I think you have to wait a minimum of 5 years, but the amount that you put in, so you put 6,000 this year, you put 6,000 next year, 5 years from now, you can withdraw the original amount that you put in, the 12,000, for example, you put it in, that you have access to at any time. But you cannot withdraw the gains until you're 59 and a half, unless you want to pay taxes and penalties and all kinds, you make your situation much more complicated. You can withdraw 10,000 to buy like your first house. And if, let's say, the original Roth owner died and someone inherited their Roth, then you can withdraw that money. But otherwise, really, you should leave it in and you shouldn't withdraw it. Okay. Let's see. Oh, let's see. I don't know why this is. Okay. What can you invest in a Roth? It's the same pretty much as a traditional IRA. You can put stocks, bonds, mutual funds, ETFs. You can invest in IPOs, which is initial public offerings. You can invest in gold, silver, precious metals. Then you can also invest in real estate directly. There's some special rules that apply, and it gets much more complicated if you do that, or through these real estate investment trusts. You can invest these like collectible things and antiques and stuff. Notable accounts. So I don't know if you heard of Peter Thiel. He was the co-founder of PayPal, but he purchased 1.7 million shares of PayPal in 1999 for, I don't know, like 1/100th of a cent each in his Roth IRA. Okay, the current value is $5 billion. So you don't really need, all these weird tax loopholes and schemes and stuff. If you have the Roth IRA, is a way for you to get tax-free growth of your assets, and everyone has access to it. You don't need special tax lawyers and all the stuff to do it. He can withdraw it in 2026 all tax-free. But the reason is because he bought it using his Roth IRA. If he bought it using his traditional IRA, or if he bought it using his regular money, then he would pay taxes on all the gains. Right? Pay a lot of taxes. But this one, you don't have to pay anything. And this is all legal, right? Okay, talking a little bit about 401ks and 403bs. Basically the same thing. These two are almost the same. 401k generally for like corporations and private companies. 403b is for like nonprofit organizations, government organizations. Most hospitals, healthcare organizations, they have 403bs. Some of them have 401ks, but really doesn't matter. It's the same. Usually these are available in both traditional and Roth. The same kind of explanations as I mentioned earlier apply to them. So traditional, you put in pre-tax dollars. So you get the tax deduction this year, and you pay taxes on it when you withdraw it later in life. Or Roth, you don't get the tax deduction this year, and when you withdraw it, when you retire, then it's all tax-free. Okay. These are tax-advantaged accounts. Some employers offer matching for employee deferrals. So let's say your employer offers 100% match up to like $3,000, for example. Then you put in $3,000, your employer is going to put in another $3,000, which is basically, if you don't take advantage of that, you're throwing away money that your employer had earmarked for you when they hired you, and you're just not taking it because you're not taking advantage of it. The limits are higher than your individual IRAs. So the employee deferral limit this year is $20,500 per year. If you're more than 50, if you add 6,500, the maximum employee and employer together, the maximum is 61,000 per year. Again, that's like 10 times more than what you can put in your individual IRAs. But if you're able to save this much money, like if you have income enough to save 20,000 per year, and your employer puts in 20,000 per year, for example, then that's a lot of money that you can save for retirement. There are some caveats to this. So typically, if your employer is offering a 401k or a 403b, you can typically only invest in funds that are specified by the employer, because they may not have all the funds available. So they might say you can invest in one of these 10 funds, for example. And so you have to go through and look and find out which one of these is the most halal. You're not going to find one unless your employer is, like Muslim, or they have an Islamic fund in their 401k, but you're probably not going to find a 100% like Islamic fund in there. And so you try to go through and see what are the companies, what are the sectors that these funds are targeting, and find which one is the closest to the Islamic one, and you can choose to put your money in that one. Again, there's a bunch of like events that you can have to be able to withdraw the money, but in general, your goal is not to withdraw the money until you retire. Okay. There's a few other rules that I won't get into. If you're self-employed, like let's say you're a freelance or moonlighting or something, and you get self-employed income, you have like 1099 income, you can open what's called a self-directed 401k, which is basically you are the employer of yourself. And so you open your own 401k, and you yourself decide which funds you can choose, which funds are part of this 401k. And so you choose like Islamic funds, for example, and then that's kind of the way to get around it. But you, again, you have to have like kind of freelance or moonlighting, 1099 income. Yeah. And then you can actually transfer the money to your Roth IRA from this self-directed IRA, and then you can use it and again, invest in whatever assets that you want to invest in, and hopefully you choose the ones that are more Islamic, right? Or that's the goal, right? Someone raised their hand. I don't see. Oh, Amul Sami. Yeah. Go ahead. Oh, someone raised their hand. Okay. Okay. An HSA is a health savings account, which is you save. This is again, they're all kind of built similarly. You save pre-tax money to pay for this one to pay for health services. You have to have like, one of these high deductible health plans, which probably have lower premiums, but they have a high deductible, and then they allow you to save and put money in your health savings account. If you qualify for this, it's good to actually maximize it because you treat it like a traditional IRA. You get deductions for putting money in it. You can grow it as much as you want, and then you use it to pay for health expenses. You cannot, let's say you go through, 3 years, you have an HSA, and then the 4th year you change insurance plans and you don't have an HSA anymore. You can't put more money in it that 4th year, but you can still use the money in there for the rest of your life as long as it's still in there. You can still use it for, health expenses in the future. An FSA, which is a flexible savings account, I think that's what it's called. This one is less flexible. I don't know what the FSA stands for, but less flexible than HSA. Basically, the employer controls the funds, and they don't allow you to roll it over to a different thing. And if you stop working for that employer, guess what? You lost all the money. So it's not as good. The HSA is better than the FSA. Can I transfer my retirement account to someone else? Upon the death of the account owner, yes, you can transfer an individual or Roth IRA to your spouse or children. This gets a lot more complicated. I won't really get into it, but in general, it's more flexible for a Roth to transfer to your children than a traditional IRA. But I'll skip over this for the sake of time. So then the question is how much money am I going to need in retirement? Again, this all depends on your specific situation, right? But you should have multiple sources of income during retirement. So Social Security, probably for someone like me, I'm fairly young. I don't think Social Security is going to be there when I retire because I think they estimate that 2035 or something, or 2040 maybe, all Social Security is going to be gone. So my assumption is that it's not going to be there for me when I retire. For your individual IRA, like a Roth or a traditional, that should give you some income, your 401k, 403b, or if you have a pension plan, which most places don't have anymore. Those, are sources of income in retirement. Okay, so let's say we'll go through a very quick scenario. Let's say your returns is at the low end of the S&P 500, which, over the past 40 years has been getting returns of 8% per year, a little bit more. But let's say your return is 8%. And let's say you only have a Roth IRA and you put $6,000 per year between the age of 35 to 49, and then you put $7,000 until the age of 65. I'm only going to talk about Roths, and I assume you're not going to withdraw anything until you're 65. And then I assume, let's say you assume you live 20 years after retirement, for example. And let's say you withdraw the same amount per year during retirement. Okay, so that's just a scenario. So this is a very quick Excel sheet that can show you. Total amount that you deposit through these years is $202,000. At the age of 65, your account value approximate $770,000. And then let's say you withdraw $50,000 per year, then at the balance at the age 85, you're still going to have 1.3 million in there. If you withdraw 80,000 per year from the age of 65 until age 84, it'll last you until the age of 84. So again, this is pretty good in general. This is your own Roth, but your spouse also has a Roth. And also remember, this is tax-free income. that you get. You also have like other income sources. So it's not the only income that you're going to be living on. But in general, I mean, you basically put the maximum into your only in the Roth. And you didn't put any money in like your 401k or any other savings or etc. But in general, I mean, it's pretty good. If you can live on 70,000 per year, for example, during retirement, I think if you do 70 and your spouse does 70, that's 140,000 per year, which I think should cover most people. The majority of people should be able to live on that income during retirement. Yeah, so bottom line, this provides plenty of funds for a comfortable retirement. In general, you should max out your tax advantage accounts before you invest in your general accounts, because the general accounts you're going to pay taxes on them through the years, but you should max out the ones that give you tax advantages. Okay. There are some arguments to which one should I do. Should I do a Roth or should I do a traditional? If you have a high income, like if your income is more than 200,000, or if your employer offers you a retirement plan at work, then you're not really going to get the tax advantages of a traditional IRA. So the Roth is better for you. Also, you have to think, there's a huge amount of public debt in the US. The US government has a huge amount of debt, and that debt is only magnifying over the next 10, 20, 50 years as there's more people retiring, health expenses go up, etc. So there's guaranteed necessarily going to be higher tax rates in the next 20 or 30 years, right? As more of these debts are due and more people retire. And so if you think about it, if you have a guarantee from the government that your Roth IRA, you're not going to pay taxes on it in the future, but your traditional IRA, you will pay taxes on it in the future, then it's better to save money in your Roth, because your traditional IRA, you're going to be paying more taxes on it in the future. Someone asked, can you explain the mega Roth 61K once again? Okay, I mean, that is a little bit more details, but yeah, we can talk about it in the end if we have. Yeah. What about IRA for kids? This is kind of as I was looking into this topic, I kind of stumbled upon this. So you could actually open a custodial Roth IRA for each child, and you can contribute up to their earned income. I think a lot of people probably don't know this. I didn't know this before I started this talk, but the child must work and must have earned, so-called earned income. But this like work is loosely defined. I mean, you can have the child do chores around the house and you pay them for it. Again, there's a limit, 6,000 per year. If your child is filing their taxes individually, then their deduction is $6,350 per year. So that's 6,000 that, let's say, they get paid for doing chores around the house or whatever job they have. They're not going to pay taxes on it. So again, this is kind of a weird thing to think about. Like your child is 15, for example, and you're going to start saving for their retirement. But if you think about it, it might make some sense. You manage the account, they take over at age 18 or 21. They can withdraw the contributions anytime without taxes or penalty. And it's kind of a good way to teach them about savings, and they can use the money to save for their house or major expenses that come in life, because the amount that they contributed, the 6,000 that they contributed every year, they can withdraw that principal amount out after it's been there for 5 years or longer. So it's kind of an interesting thing. So I just kind of threw an example. You open a custodial Roth IRA for your child at age 15. You contribute 6,000 per year for like they do chores or whatever. And let's say you assume 8% return. Let's say at age 35, they withdraw 100,000 because they want to buy a house or something. The maximum they can withdraw at this point is 120, because that's the principal that they put in. But guess what? I mean, when they turn 65, that account's going to be astronomically high, and they can withdraw a huge amount, during retirement. So they probably don't need to save anything else other than this one Roth IRA that they started at age 15. They probably don't need to save anything else for their retirement, and they'll be fine during retirement. Okay. So what about college savings accounts? So these are generally called 529 plans. it's a way to help people save for college expenses for their kids. I'm not going to go through all the details, but it's similar to before. It's like you put in pre-tax money into it and you can grow it as much as you want. And then you don't pay taxes on it as long as you use it for college expenses. However, there is a caveat to this. You know, each state has their own 529 plan, and you can, you know, even if you live, like, let's say you live in Missouri, you can go to the Illinois 529 plan. You can do whatever plan you want, any state. But the state restricts where the money can be invested, and most of these are your local, municipal, or state bonds. So in general, this is like considered halal because the money is only able to be invested in bonds. And the other kind of advantage of this college savings account is there's a minimal impact on your FAFSA or other financial aid, but in general, this is not halal because you're very, very restricted. This is much more restricted than other financial assets because these are only in bonds, right? So they pay interest.
There was a request to go back to the kids IRA because it seems very interesting topic. Since we are here already, can you go back to like a couple of slides and just review the kids IRA?
Which one? This one?
Yes.
Yeah, so this custodial IRA. So as long as the child is working, and again, work is loosely defined, you can, let's say they earn, let's say they earn 3,000 that year from working. You can put that 3,000 into their Roth, but you can't put more. Okay, you can only put up until the amount that they earned that year. Okay, but it doesn't necessarily have to be money coming from them. Like, let's say they worked, I don't know, they worked in a restaurant or something. Okay?
So let's say I'm paying my daughter for babysitting, for example.
Sure, yeah, for babysitting, right? Let's say you pay her 6,000 for babysitting, right? I mean, it has to be like reasonable, right? She can't babysit one time and you pay her $6,000, right? It has to be reasonable, right? Okay. But let's say in the year you pay her 6,000. That 6,000 that she's going to put into her Roth IRA doesn't necessarily have to come from her, right? She can that 6,000 she can use it for herself, whatever she wants to buy things, right? And you can put the 6,000 into her Roth. You can even do it without her knowing if you want, or you can just tell her that I'm doing this. But it's not necessarily that the money has to come from her, but the maximum she can put that year is up to 6,000 as long as she earned that much that year.
Perfect. And the kid should be 15 and above, right?
There's no actually age. I mean, if you have like a child model or some, some of these kids that are like baby models or something, right? Okay. They earn a lot of money when they're 3 years old. I mean, they can put that money at any age, right?
Interesting.
There's no like minimum age, as long as they actually earned money, right?
Sorry, I'm asking randomly, but we're gonna have a thorough Q&A session at the end. You mentioned the college, what's called the slide after this, the college saving account. Is it the same as educational saving account that goes through our employers?
So those I didn't actually read a lot about those. Those are very different. Okay. In terms of your employer will select which funds you can put the money in. And my understanding is that these are also bonds. Again, because most people, when they think about saving for college, they typically don't want to save in a stock market, which is considered higher risk. And so they, in general, would prefer to save in bonds because they're lower risk. Okay. But you have to kind of look and see which assets that your employer is specifying for your educational savings accounts. But I think, from my understanding, I think most of those are bonds as well. Yeah. But you have to look. Each employer is different.
Which is not halal.
Which is not halal, yeah. There is a different kind of asset or, kind of collection. It's called a UGMA, which is a Uniform Gift to Minors Act. This is basically a way for you to transfer assets to a minor without using a trust, okay? A trust makes it a lot more complicated, but this is a way to do it kind of like a mini trust type of way. So you can open one account for each child. You deposit. There's no tax advantages to any of this UGMA. There's no, so, you have to think about that. But you deposit post-tax money to the account. And you invest it as you like. You want to put it in whatever Islamic investing that you want, you can do that. You manage it until the child turns 18 or 21, then it becomes their asset. And then they can use it to pay for college, they can use it for whatever they want, right? You can deposit up to 16,000 per individual per child. So you and your spouse each, are like kind of pseudo gifting 16,000 to your child. So you can do 32,000 per year per child in this account. Again, as I mentioned, there's no specific tax advantages you get for depositing the money. And the minor will become the owner of this account when they turn 18 or 21. And then the taxes on the returns of this account are paid by the owner, which is the child. Usually the child has lower tax bracket, tax rate than the adult, than the parents. So, but there is this kind of caveat. The first 1150 of earnings is tax-free, okay? The next 1150 is taxed at the child's tax rate, which is usually lower. And then after that, the rest of the earnings are taxed at the parent's tax rate. There is this like estate tax caveat if the donor, if the parent dies before the account is transferred to the child, then it's subject to estate tax. But again, estate tax doesn't apply unless you're transferring more than $12 million to your inheritors. And then the other thing, the caveat that you have to think about is any amount of money in this account is going to be reported to FAFSA, and so it'll decrease the amount of financial aid the child may qualify for. So if your financial situation is that your income is high, which most physicians are, then it's really not, you really shouldn't care about it, because regardless, you're going to be paying for college for your child, or your child will get student loans, for example, and pay for their college. But if your income is low and you may qualify for financial aid from the universities or from the government, for example, then this is probably not a very good idea. Because they're going to use the money in this account first before they give you financial aid. Okay, so as I mentioned, you start out by maxing your Roth IRA for you and your spouse. Don't touch the returns, but you pay Zakat accordingly. And you max out your HSA, max out your employer tax advantage accounts. And then, if you have spare money left over, you can put it in a general investment or brokerage account. And this is money that you can pull out at any time. But in general, you're going to be paying taxes on the general account. So the best way to do this is to have like monthly investments. So if you want to, let's say you want to do 6,000 per year in the Roth, then that's $500 a month. You just put that monthly into your Roth, and for your spouse the same way. Rather than kind of putting it in a lump sum at some point, it's probably better to do it in it's called a dollar cost averaging. So you're going to be disciplined and you're going to buy the assets, whether the stock market is up or down, it doesn't matter. But in the end, on average, you're going to get the average returns for the market. So time in the market is more than timing the market. So why not just hire a professional to do it all? So most financial professionals don't know all the intricacies of Islamic financing, what's halal or haram, and it's also very, very expensive. Okay, so you're a physician, for example, and you have high income potential. So you are very lucrative to the financial services industry. Okay, so I get emails. I don't know why these pictures are not showing up, but I get emails like almost every other day from financial advisors that want me to, attend their seminar on how they can help me manage my finances, because I'm supposedly very lucrative to them, because they can make a lot of money. We'll briefly talk about the financial services industry. There's something called a certified financial planner, certified financial consultant. These people need bachelor's degrees. They have certification in testing. Financial planners typically need a bachelor's degree in any field, and they take a few courses in financial planning. Financial advisors actually don't have a specific degree. They take a few courses in financial planning. They don't really need a license. They're not a fiduciary. Fiduciary means they have to put their client's interest first. A fiduciary financial advisor, they have specific duties towards their clients. So again, they cannot advise you to put your money in a specific asset unless you your interests are there first, then their interest is later. And they must be upfront to you about the commissions that they receive from the funds, right? Whereas the financial advisor that's not a fiduciary doesn't have to be upfront with you about how much they're receiving from the funds or whether this is the best, place to put your money, et cetera, et cetera. They will put your money in the place that makes them the most money, not you the most money. Okay. Again, I don't know why these pictures are not showing up. But even more confusing is there's some financial advisors that they act as fiduciaries with some of their dealings, but not as fiduciary with other dealings, and sometimes with the same client. So let's say you go to them and you say, hey, I have this money that I want to invest. They tell you, oh yeah, I'm a fiduciary and I will invest, your money in this account, for example, whatever. You go to them a few months later and you say, oh, I have some more money that I want to invest in a different way. Let's say I want to open, an account for my child for college savings or whatever. If they don't specify to you that they are a fiduciary in that transaction, that second transaction, then they don't have to be a fiduciary in that second transaction. Then they'll put your money in whatever account that makes them the most money, not you. Right? So you have to be very careful with this. I don't know why these pictures are not showing up.
Try to exit from the presentation mode and come back. If that works. Yep.
See, it says this picture cannot be displayed. I don't know why. Okay.
I'm sorry.
That's fine. So let's do the math. So financial advisor, how they work, they take your money and they invest it in whatever financial assets, stocks, bonds, mutual funds. Those funds, they charge an annual fee. Remember I mentioned earlier, a mutual fund, they charge, 0.7% per year, or the ETF, they charge 0.4% per year, whatever. And they sometimes also charge a performance fee. The financial advisor also charges an annual fee on top of that. So the average financial advisor in the US charges 1.02% for accounts more than $1 million, and then a higher percentage for smaller accounts. Okay, so you have to think 1%, oh, that's not that much, but we can kind of calculate it. And then the financial advisor also is going to receive paybacks from the assets they invest their clients' money in. So let's say they get, $100,000 and they buy a fund. They're the ones sending the money to the fund. That's your money. They're sending it to that fund. The fund is going to give them a kickback of 1 or 2% as, kind of like a finder's fee. And that amount is built into the cost of the fund. You ultimately are the one paying for that. And you also pay them an additional 1.02% per year. Okay. So what about a CPA? So a CPA is a certified public accountant. These people have a degree. They have advanced degrees. They must pass a license examination, board examination. They work in tax planning, audits, accounting for companies, etc. You can hire one if you need help, like filing your taxes or making a will or making these complicated financial assets. And if you think your tax situation is more complicated, then you can hire a CPA. But usually, if you don't have your own small business, usually your tax situation is not super complicated to the point where you would need a CPA. You can have one if you want. But they can also act as a financial advisor. So they can take money and take over and manage your investments, and they're going to charge you an annual fee. They're going to get kickbacks from funds, etc. And they're not always a fiduciary. Okay, so let's do the math. So let's say you do a 4-year time period from January 1982 until January 2022. And I had a picture here that showed you the actual return, but of the S&P 500. Okay, you buy an ETF such as VOO, which is the Vanguard S&P 500 fund, which is they charge you 0.03% per year for fees. Or you buy, a different one, which is even less. Or you buy a mutual fund such as Amana, for example, charge you 0.8 if your account is more than 100,000, or otherwise they charge you 1.04%. And then also we're going to buy the above through a financial advisor or through your own self. You do it yourself. Start with $0, and let's say you're investing $1,000 per month for the first 30 years, and then you just let it grow an additional 10. So let's do the math. So let's say you put your money in VOO, it's 0.03% per year. The total amount you invest is $361. 40 years, you're going to be paying $27,000 in fees. And your balance 30 years later is 3-point-something million, and your balance 40 years later is 10 million. Okay, so that's your kind of baseline. Let's say you invested in Amana, for example, which is 1.04% per year. The same amount you invested, but the fees, look at the fees, 27,000 versus 742,000. and your balance after 30 years, instead of 3.2 million, it's 2.6 million. And instead of at 40 years, instead of 10 million, it's 7.5. It's like 25% less, right? So even though it's 1%, which you think, oh, 1% is not that much, but if you compound it over 40 years, look at the huge difference, like 28% decrease in the value of your assets. And let's say you buy the VOO through a financial advisor, again, your returns are going to be similar to the Amana, right? Because you have 1.02% plus 1.03, or plus 0.03. And then let's say you buy Amana through a financial advisor, so you pay 1% for Amana, 1% for a financial advisor. You're going to end up, 2% per year, but look at this end balance, 5 million, so like half. So it's a huge difference. So this is how they make their money, because they get paid every year that you have money in their accounts. They get paid, and if it's like 1% or 0.5%, that's still a huge amount of money that they're taking from you. Okay. Yeah. Student loans, I'll skip over this. May not. Disability insurance, they're in medicine they tell us that.
Owais?
Yeah.
I got a question regarding a case exactly like yours from a student who reached a breaking point, was willing to quit the medical school because of the loan, because he thought that was haram. After I explained the law, alhamdulillah, he was very happy, and now he's continuing his medical school. Could you shed some light on that, please?
Yeah. Okay. So, everyone knows that medical students, they graduate with a huge amount of loans. So let's say you graduate with, $200,000 in debts, and you want to try to pay, and the interest rates on these student loans are extremely high, average of 7.5% per year. So let's say you're trying to pay $200,000 over 10 years at 7.5%. You're going to be paying $2,300 a month over 10 years, right? And if let's say you have a physician's salary, $250 per year, you take away all the taxes and stuff, this is like 20% of your take-home pay, which is a huge amount, right? For you to be paying for student loans for 10 years. There's lots of options. So the public service loan forgiveness is the most popular one, which you sign up for this thing called an income-based repayment plan. So they take your income and they decide how much you will be paying, and you pay it for 10 years, as long as you are working in all the hospitals, or most of the hospitals they count, or government agencies or nonprofit organizations, or like public service, which is now more loosely defined as it used to be, because they changed the law about a year ago. They kind of more loosely defined what public service means, to allow more people to qualify for public service loan forgiveness. But you're paying 10% of your income over 10 years, okay? So let's say if you're gonna be in training for a long time, let's say you're doing neurosurgery, or let's say like me, for example, you do 3 years of internal medicine, and then you do a year of chief year, and then 3 years of cardiology, then a year of interventional, and then maybe something after that, who knows? I'm going to be in training for that long, like 8 years, right? So my income is going to be low, because I'm going to be paid as a resident and a fellow for that long, for 8 years. And so my payments per month is going to be somewhere around $300 a month, right? For the time that I'm in training. Okay, and then after that, once I become an attending, and I start having higher income, then I will be paying 10% of that income for 2 years, right? And as long as I paid 120 payments, it doesn't matter how high, the 7.5%, however high my student loan balance becomes, the government will forgive the rest of it, okay? So I only pay for 10 years. But if I'm going to be in training for a very short time, for example, let's say I'm going to be in training, I'm going to do just internal medicine residency and start working right away as a hospitalist, for example, then I'm only going to be in training for 3 years. So I'm only going to get that low payments for 3 years. And after that, I'm going to be an attending, and I'm going to have to pay much higher amount, because my income is going to be much higher for the next 7 years. So public service loan forgiveness probably is not as good an option as me just paying it off all outright, right? As soon as I get my first job as an attending, I just pay off as much as I can that first year, and maybe it takes me 2 years to pay off the whole thing, and khalas, I just get it over with. Rather than waiting 10 years. Because if I wait 10 years, guess what? I'm going to be paying 10% of my high income for the next 7 years, and I will probably end up paying more than if I had just paid it off outright. Does that make sense? But it kind of depends on how long you're going to be in training.
Yeah, and Columbia, Missouri, as I came to know, it is considered to be less served spot on the map.
Yeah, but I think most hospitals nowadays, if you're in the medical field, most hospitals nowadays qualify for considered public service.
I think this will take us for a subdivision, like a branch question. Although it's like a big topic, from Sharia perspective, the interest that comes with the student loan, how that can be justified from halal, from Islamic point of view. Maybe Dr. Shakir can answer this question, or we can skip altogether and discuss it.
Maybe you want to wait until the end, or you want me to answer briefly?
Yes,
okay.
Okay. So in short, if you're in medical school right now, then it kind of depends if you want to do public service loan forgiveness. It depends on how long you're going to be in training. If you want to end up doing a short training specialty, like internal medicine, family medicine, even if you do ophthalmology for 4 years and not specialize after that, then it probably you should keep in mind that you should pay off your student loan as fast as possible, because waiting for 10 years won't make as much sense as if you just pay it off fully. But if you're going to be in training for, like me, I'm going to be in training for 8 years, and I'm only going to be in attending for 2 years out of this 10, then for me, it makes more sense to do public service loan forgiveness, because I will pay a very small amount for the 8 years, because my income is going to be low for the 8 years before I start working as an attendant. Okay. There are other options. So there's like the VA, for example. If you work there for 5 years, you can have up to $40,000 per year forgiven, repaid. The VA will repay it for you. And there's VAs almost everywhere. There's Public Service Corps, which if you are an underserved work area and you apply for their program, then you can get all or some of your student loans repaid. I mean, there's lots of options. Okay. So I think what I'll probably, because now it's 8:15, we'll talk about Zakat a little bit, what is considered. So Zakat is due on 3 types of assets. So your produce of your land, gold and silver, which is basically, your fiat currency, and then livestock. So contemporary scholars, they extrapolated these to almost all kinds of modern assets. So if you have like land, business assets, investment assets, etc., this is considered like produce, plowed land. If you have like fiat money, crypto, all this stuff is like gold and silver, and then livestock is the other asset. So I'll probably skip through this, but very briefly. But in general, if you have money in your brokerage account, which is just the money that you can access at any time, you can sell your assets and then get it, then that is, any money you put in is zakatable, because your investment returns, you must pay taxes on them if you take them out. And so just take out the tax portion and then calculate your zakat. Okay. If you have money in retirement accounts, those get a little bit more tricky because you don't have full access to them at all times. So in general, you don't have easy access to, for example, the pension account, you don't have access to it at all unless you worked in the company for 30 years, for example. So for the 30 years that you're working, then you can't count that pension, the amount of money in the pension, as money that you own, because you don't actually own it. Because let's say you end up only working in the company for less than 30 years, then you probably will get a huge cut in the amount of money that's in there. Also, the amount of money in your 401k, 403b, IRAs, these are not very easily accessible to you because you have to pay taxes and fees and penalties if you take them out. So you have to account for that. So in general, this is what kind of most people agreed upon. If your intention is short-term investing, so let's say your intention is to day trade, to buy a stock, and then your intention is you're going to sell it at a later date for a higher price, and you expect to keep it for less than a year when you bought it, right? Then you consider this to be like almost like money, right? It's not like you're holding these stocks and you're expecting to get dividends and profits from them. No, it's like you're holding them because you wait for the value to go up, and you will sell it at a later date, which is a short amount of time. But you must consider this as cash, right? So you pay 2.5% for this. But if you're long-term investing, there's two methods, and I'll go through the more agreed upon method. We classify this investment as like a land asset, like the returns you get from it are considered like produce, right? And so you pay zakat on the produce, okay? So, there's different kind of opinions, but most scholars agree that stocks fall into this like 10% category, as we can clearly calculate the capital gains that you get. And so you pay 10% on the gain that you accumulate over the year, okay? So let's say you start the year at $100, okay? At the end of the year, that account is worth $120, okay? You gained $20 that year, and so you pay 10% of the 20. That's your zakat. So you pay $2, for example, okay? 10% of the gain. And then again, the retirement, as I mentioned earlier, retirement accounts and those other accounts, you have to take away, you calculate the gain, but you have to take away the fees and the taxes you would pay if you were to withdraw it that year, okay? In general, like the fees are 10%, like the penalty fees to take out money, and then the taxes, whatever your tax bracket is. Yeah, and then you calculate the zakat on the gain. And then interesting, yeah,
just to clarify, the zakat here is 10%, not 2.5%.
10% of the gain.
Yes.
Yeah, 10% of the gain.
Like a produce of a land, not like the 2.5% that we classify.
Not 2.5% of the whole thing. It's 10% of the gain.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I interrupt here?
Yeah.
They look at it like the land that produce, and it is irrigated either by rain, and then the tax on the produce will be 10%, or if it was irrigated by machinery, then the zakah will be 5%. So this is well established in there. So the stock, you are not really
not doing anything.
Any irrigation, you are not putting any work into it. It is in the market and it is working, especially if it is not short-term investment. Yeah. So that is where the 10% come from. It is by qiyas, it's analogy to the land that is irrigated by the rain, which is the help of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So more taxes are more zakah is due.
I think Dr. Ilham had a question.
Okay, assalamu alaikum. Can I ask that? Okay, so where's the regarding the retirement account, you said that if someone would draw it, he has to pay 10% penalty. Is true. So say, for example, someone has $100,000, an example, and if this is his money, but if you draw it today, he will get only 90,000. 10,000 will be penalty, correct?
Yeah.
So some scholar says you have to pay for the 90,000 because you have this money. If you want to draw it today, you can withdraw it with the penalty. So you take the penalty out. You don't have to pay for the penalty amount, zakat for the penalty amount, but you have to pay for the amount you can withdraw it today. That's your money.
Yeah.
So just look at it again. Yeah.
Yeah. So, and the money in that account, you're not like day trading with it. You're putting it for a long-term plan, right? And so in general, if the money is in the market, then you count the zakat on the gain, right? So if it gained, let's say it gained, $20 this year, take away the 10% take away 10% for the penalty, okay? And then the remainder, which is going to be, 20 minus 10% is 18. So you pay the 10% on the 18. I think that's how you calculate it.
It's from the retirement account.
From the retirement account, yes.
Okay, so you still have to pay. You still have to pay zakat from the retirement account, but not the whole amount.
You
But
pay on
the-
the gain, You don't pay the 2.5% for the retirement account. You pay the gain that it gained that year, right? Because it's considered like a land, right?
So not from the entire, say for example, you have $1 million, you don't have to pay $1 million. If you earn 20,000 in this year, so you pay from the
10%.
20,000.
You pay 10% of the 20,000.
10% of the 20,000. Okay.
Can I inject here?
Yeah.
This is in qiyas or analogy to a rented property. You do not pay zakah on the value of the house, but you pay zakah on the return of the rent.
Dr. Owais, would you mind if we just carry on? Let's try to finish, and then we get the questions again.
Sure. Again, interest income, I think it's just kind of a mute point, but don't, if you receive interest income, which you'll get on your tax return, then you have to get rid of that money and don't count that as part of zakat or anything, right? Yeah. Let's see. So, I think this is like one of the last slides. So what can I invest in? So there's, there are some new options that you can put your money in that are more halal. So amana, I think everyone knows it, but although the fees are kind of high, and there's different amana funds that you can put your money in. There's new ones that like SPUS, SPRE. These are like Sharia compliant S&P 500 funds. These are ETFs. The fees are lower, like 0.49, 0.5, etc. And then there's like other sector specific funds. So these generally have much lower expense ratios. So usually at 0.08 or 0.1%. And you can choose the sectors that are more like halal, like health, for example, or like consumer products, communication companies, for example, like AT&T and T-Mobile. There's like a fund for that, utility companies, etc. Clean energy, for example. And there's lots of overlap of these funds, like the SPUS, for example, is very heavy on health funds, health stocks, and technology stocks and consumer products. So, I mean, if you choose these three, you're probably going to end up getting similar portfolio, like build up of SPUS. And, you'll pay less money because the fees are less. There's an app called Zoya that can kind of guide you if you want to buy, if you're thinking of buying individual stocks, like if you want to buy Apple or Microsoft or whatever, they can tell you if this is like halal or not, etc. If there's a specific stock like company that you're interested in putting your money in. And then you can also like invest in real estate, like you can either directly invest in real estate or you can indirectly. There are collective companies, they're relatively newer that are coming out, typically have very high minimums. So you have to put like 5,000 or 50,000 in, but they have pretty good returns because they'll take your money and they'll buy, commercial property or they'll buy rental property and they'll give you their returns over, many years, etc. Okay, so I think I skipped over the disability insurance. So disability insurance, a lot of times in medical school, even in residency, they tell us, oh, you have to get disability insurance because if you get disabled, which is, a significant proportion of physicians and people in general get disabled. About 12 to 18% of Americans are disabled. And a third of them who have a disability will have a disability that lasts more than 90 days. And an eighth of them are going to have a disability that lasts more than 5 years, right? And so if you're disabled, the disability insurance will pay out about 60 to 80% of your income if you're disabled more than 90 days. So this one is actually, if you don't have that much saved up, like if your retirement accounts and your general investment account doesn't have a lot of money in, then this probably makes a little bit more sense because, you have a lot of student debt, for example, or you have a lot of expenses, or, you're a physician, you're expecting to live a certain lifestyle. But then all of a sudden you get disabled and, you run into a situation where you have a lot of, you have a car, you have a house, you have this and that, college expenses, and you are unable to afford any of them because you are not able to work, right? And so, the question of whether disability insurance is halal is very unclear. I still don't really know the answer. I don't know if my dad can shed some light on what is considered halal or not. Because insurance in general, in the modern sense of the word insurance, modern days, is very different than insurance that they had back in the day of the Rasul Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, where they had kind of it was like a collective fund that, they put money together, and if they didn't use the money at the end of the year, then it would be distributed back to the original people that put the money in. Nowadays, there's no such thing as getting money back from insurance. But, you have to think about also it's fairly catastrophic if someone becomes disabled and they have, all kinds of expenses and they are unable to afford to even live. They'll throw you out on the street, right? If you can't afford your house, they'll throw you out on the street. It's a different kind of social setup than like back home, for example. So I don't know, Bob, if you have any thoughts on this topic.
You did not mention anything about life insurance.
No, life insurance is just generally agreed this.
Yeah, the disability insurance has a high risk. I mean, you get the insurance because your job has a high risk. So
Yes.
it is less haram than the life insurance. And if you really are at the front line and your day in and day out job is of high risk, then probably is a good idea to have that. The scholars really are still in a continuous discussion about all the insurance business. And some scholars, they will tell you, hey, even the insurance of your car is haram, but sometimes you just cannot help it, So it is an open discussion for this. I would say if your job is of high risk, then the worst case scenario, you take the insurance and as a way to seek forgiveness of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, try to donate maybe some to good causes. So some either equal or portion of what you paid to the disability insurance to some good Muslim causes. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgive us all. That's the best we can do.
Yeah, there are some people that say, insurance is like gambling, but actually I don't think it is the same, because gambling has its own like psychological, aspect to it. First of all, people go to gamble because it's considered fun, right? And they expect to get higher money than they put in, right? And there's also a psychological thing about people getting addicted and all that stuff. I don't think anyone buys disability insurance wanting to become disabled, right? No one does that.
No.
They buy it because, there is a very high risk if they don't get it and they end up getting disabled. It's a very high risk that they have, they'll end up living on the street if they don't have family support or anything like that. And because there's no mercy in the US. There's no mercy for any of that stuff, right?
Yeah.
So, and the same with health insurance. Like, no one buys health insurance wanting to get sick, right? No, they buy it because if you pay out of pocket, you're gonna go bankrupt, right? That's the most common cause of bankruptcy in the US. And no one can by themselves afford these very advanced technologies and healthcare services if they didn't have insurance, unless they're, multi-millionaire, right? Then they won't be able to afford all this stuff. The same with kind of disability insurance is, it's kind of different than gambling. I don't think you can say that.
Yeah, definitely is not
as gambling.
I think Dr. Ayman has a question.
Yeah.
Dr. Ayman, you have a question.
Yeah, assalamu alaikum.
Jazakumullah
khairan online for this time and a lot of information. Barakallahu feekum, yani.
Yeah.
So my question about the Roth and traditional IRA.
Yeah.
This is something I was not, I was totally unfamiliar with that until maybe last year.
Mm-hmm.
So when you put it there, do you have control over that money or no? Like investment wise, because you put it like the government have control, right?
No, so the Roth and the traditional IRA, those are called individual retirement IRAs.
They're individual.
Yeah, you control it. You can put it wherever you want.
Your voice system always.
No, you control that fund. So you put $6,000 in your Roth IRA, and you want to buy, this Amana, for example, mutual fund. You can put the entire 6,000 in Amana, and you leave it there, and that's it. You don't think about it anymore, right? Or if you want, you can buy other mutual funds, other ETFs. You have full option to buy whatever you want. Even if you have, like, let's say you have enough money in there and you can buy a house, you can buy a house with your IRA, and then you get rental income, and that rental income will go to the IRA, right? So like, you can do anything you want, really. Almost any kind of asset you can think of, you can put it into your IRA. The advantage is that you don't pay taxes on it. If it's a Roth, you don't pay taxes on the gains. If it's a traditional IRA, then you don't pay taxes on the money you put in, but you will pay taxes later.
Gotcha. And you mentioned something about the backdoor Roth IRA.
Okay.
You start with the traditional one and you take it back to the Roth IRA.
Yes. So, okay. So the backdoor, so your Roth IRA, which is the best, I think, the best kind of account you can have, right? Because you don't pay taxes in the end, right?
Yeah.
But if your income is more than 200 something per year, I think 212,000 for you if you're married, filing jointly, then you don't have, you cannot put the money into your Roth IRA. You can't directly put it into your Roth IRA.
If your income is more than 200K?
200 something, yeah. 212, I think, thousand. You can't put money into a Roth. Okay. But what you could do is you could put money into a traditional IRA, and then at the same day or the next day, before it gains anything, right? You convert it into a Roth. And you do this through your financial company. So either Fidelity or Vanguard, all of them have those options. But you just call them or you go online and do it. And you say, oh, I want to reclassify my traditional IRA contribution and make it a Roth. And they'll do it for you. And they'll send you a tax form at the end of the year, and then you'll be able to file your taxes accordingly. You won't get any tax advantages when you do that immediately, right? Because you're putting the money into a Roth. But you will, when you withdraw it 30 years from now or whenever, you won't pay taxes on the gains.
I see. But you will get tax benefit if you left it in the traditional IRA, right?
So it depends. If you have a retirement plan at work, which most of you do, then you won't get any tax advantages if you put in a traditional IRA.
Oh, I see.
You will not,
I see.
right? So it's the same. So leaving it in the traditional, if you have a tax plan, if you have a retirement plan at work and you put money in the traditional IRA, you will not get tax advantage this year. And then later in your retirement, you will still pay taxes on the gains. So you're actually going to get taxed both ways. So what you should do is you should put it in the traditional, because there's no income limits for the traditional, right? And then reclassify it a day later before it has the ability to gain anything. Reclassify it a day later and convert it to a Roth. And then you let it grow in the Roth.
Yeah, so excuse my ignorance here, but so what is the difference if I do it by the end of the year and I put it directly? Because it's post-tax. So this means it is post-tax, right?
It's post-tax.
So what's the difference if you do it? Yeah, what if you do it like by the end of the year and you put the whole amount in the Roth IRA directly? So what's the benefit of starting at the traditional and moving?
You won't be able to put it directly into the Roth because your income is more than 200 something thousand. If your income is that much. If your income is less, then you can put it directly in a Roth and don't worry about all this backdoor stuff.
Oh, I see what
if your income is more than 200 something, I think 212,000 for the year, you and your wife together, then you cannot directly put the money into a Roth.
That makes sense. I'm not sure if anybody else is waiting, or I can ask one more question.
Yeah, go ahead.
There is a message here came that the Roth IRA jointly filed 214,000 or more than not eligible.
214, okay. Yeah, something like that.
Okay, Dr.
So
one more question.
One about the kids, having
Yeah.
them.
Yeah.
Can you explain more about this, if I can? And also, there is a maximum age limit or no? You said like no minimum age limit, but there is maximum.
I mean, when they turn 18, then it becomes their account, right?
I see.
So there's really no
But-
maximum age limit. Like, what you can do, let's say your child starts a job at age 15 or, something like that.
Mhm.
And then you can put 6,000 per year for them. Then they go to college, for example, they pick up a simple job or something. Again, you can be the one contributing the 6,000 to their account as long as they have earned income. As long as they have income that year of more than $6,000, you can put up to their amount that they earn.
I see.
Into their
And this
Roth.
will not affect your amount. Like if you are putting 7 for
No,
yourself and
this-
7 for your wife.
No, this will
This
not
is different.
affect your amount. Each person is individual.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes. Thank you.
Yeah.
جزاكم الله خيرا.
Yeah, you can let it grow. Yes.
جزاكم الله خيرا.
Yeah, wait. Any other questions?
There's a question about purifying the money in case you are investing in companies, even through some of the halal agencies who used to invest in Islamic or Sharia compliant ways. But there must be some ways that your money get contaminated with non-halal
Yeah.
business.
So you can donate money on top of the zakat. You can donate whatever percent that you feel. In general, I mean, if you're investing in these like halal funds, like these ones that I mentioned, then they try their best to have less than 5% of their funds, of their amount, be like, in non-halal assets. Right? They try their best. Or the companies that they buy, in have less than 5% dealings in interest and like these non-halal assets. So, but in general, like I had an example where I would show you like a spreadsheet of a company. I would show you the spreadsheet of Apple, and we would go through how much of their dealings are like haram, like interest based, and out of I don't know how much they sold, $300-something billion. Their interest based, whether interest that they paid or interest that they earned, was about $500 million, which is like 1 out of 0.3% of their entire earnings that year was like interest based. Again, very small, right?
So,
But it's still a huge amount of money. But in the global scheme of things, percent wise, they're very small.
so let's say you made the profit like $1,000 through Apple, then you have to subtract like 1% out of that as a tathir from your income.
Yeah, for example, yeah,
Roughly. Okay.
something like that.
Is there any like specific or like wide halal source of investment? So you mentioned technology, you mentioned health sectors. So let's
Yeah,
get
like communication, utility companies.
Yeah. So what of things that we can invest in a halal way?
I mean, these things. Either these funds that are already kind of pre-made for you, right? Like HLAL or SPUS. These, they have a manager that makes sure on a daily basis, make sure that the money that they have is in halal funds. Or you can go into the sector ones, which is like kind of more general, like each company has its own sector funds. But in general, we can say, healthcare is like, in general is a halal asset, or technologies in general, halal asset. And we're going to avoid like finance sector. We're going to avoid, the casino sector, or we're going to avoid like the industrial sector, because industrials, a lot of those are like defense contractors, or these aerospace technology companies that are probably ethically problematic, and may not be halal actually completely. And so you avoid those, but you can put your money in health and tech and consumer product, these kind of things.
Anas Al-Rifa'i has a question. Feel free to unmute yourself.
Yeah, Jazakallah khairan. Thank you so much for this valuable presentation. I have a question about the zakat, what you mentioned, that only on the gains you pay. So if you are putting money in an account and you're managing yourself, and within that year you don't make any money, does that mean you don't owe any zakat on the money that you put in to manage?
Yeah, that means if you didn't gain it. So if your intention, okay, it's based on your intention, right? If your intention that year is that you're going to be day trading, you're going to be looking at the markets, and you're going to be buying and selling based on what the market does, right? Then no, then you're going to be paying 2.5%, because this is not considered like a land that you plow and then get the gain from, right? Because this is your day trading. This is considered like cash, right? One day I'm going to look at the market. Oh, this company had a good news. I'm going to buy from it. Or this company had a bad, whatever, and I'm going to sell it, et cetera, et cetera. Your intention is from the beginning. My intention is to day trade. Okay, then you're going to be paying 2.5%. If your intention is I'm going to be holding this for a time in the future, which I think is going to be more than 1 year from now, a time in the future, and I will be getting benefits based on dividends and capital gains, the company doing better and making newer products, and I get profits from those, et cetera, and I will save this money for when I want to buy a house, or when I want to retire, or pay for college for my kids, et cetera, then that is considered a land, asset, and you will pay 10% on the gain. If you end up not gaining anything this year, then you don't pay any zakat.
Got it. Okay.
Can I inject here?
Yeah.
Day trade investment is not a halal procedure, because your commodity is money, and that is not accepted Islamically. So I advise everybody who asks me about day trade investment, I will tell them it is not halal, because there is really no sense of investing in commodities other than the currency. So from that perspective, it is not advised to do short-term investment. Not only day trading, but even a few days or a few weeks. As you said, it depends upon the intention. But I would add not only to pay 2.5% of the whole thing, but it is not halal.
Okay, I have a follow-up question to that question. So if you decide, like, instead of buying all that, to buy an actual piece of land and just like sit on it, say for whatever, 6 years, 7 years, 10 years, and then sell it. So you don't owe anything on the land until you sell. You owe 10% on what you made. Is that a correct extrapolation from what you mentioned?
On the rental income that you get minus the expenses. Yeah, exactly.
And that's only when you sell. So for those 10 years, you're not paying anything.
Could you ask the question again?
Let's say someone buys a land with a plan to make that his investment. So he wants to buy the land for 100,000 and want to just sit on it and wait 10 years and sell it. He doesn't owe anything on the 100,000 for the entire 10 years until he sells it.
So is he renting it or not?
No, he just bought the land and he just leaving it alone because he thinks it's going to appreciate in that area.
And the question is?
And the question is, what zakat does he owe?
Nothing. When you sell it, you pay zakat for 1 year only.
No, I think it's a little bit different. He's not renting it.
He's not. Yes, he's not renting.
Just putting money in land.
Yes,
right.
And he is not putting a sign on it for sale. And whenever the chance comes, he will sell. No, he is sitting on it. He is not selling it for 10 years. After the 10 years, he will announce it. From that moment until he sells it, maybe he sells it in the year 12, not 10. So from that point, 10, before the 10 years, he does not owe any tax. After the 10 years, when he announces it, until he sells it, the scholars have two opinions. He has to pay, when he sells it, he has to pay for the years from 10 to 12. The other, which is more friendly, really, and I lean toward that, is to pay the taxes when you sell it for 1 year.
Zakat, yeah.
Yeah, so the zakat, yes.
And
so
that's 10% of your gain, like not for...
No. That is considered to be a can of beans in a store. You are not cultivating the land and produce, wheat or palm trees or whatever. No, that the 10% is when you irrigate the land by the rain. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala helps you to irrigate your land. You pay 10% of the product. If you use machinery to irrigate your land, you pay 5% as a zakah.
So in this example, what are you exactly paying? Let's say someone bought a land for 100,000, sat 10 years and sold it for 200,000. And let's say his cost in this time is 20,000. So his actual net gain is 80,000. What does he pay for zakah?
No, he will pay zakah for the full amount when he sells it.
2.5%.
Not only for the
200,000 for the entire 200,000.
Not only for the profit. This is exactly like a piece, a can of beans in a store.
Got it. Okay.
That is subject to sell any time. Okay, it is a commodity. It is not rented property. It is not cultivated land, and it is not a stock that is doing some work in the market, improving the economy of the society. No, this is a piece of land that you intended to sell it when the price is right. And you decided for 10 years, I am not going to sell it in earlier than 10 years. So for 10 years, you do not owe any zakah. After the 10 years, when you announce it in the market for sale, there are two opinions. If you sell it in the year 15, year 12, year 11, if you sell it immediately. So the first opinion is you pay zakah for every year after the 10. The other one, which is I lean toward, is you pay zakah for 1 year only when you sell it, and that will also apply to big items like cars, like a house you announce for sale and it does not sell for 5 years maybe. So you do not owe zakah every year, because this is, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is not making this deen as a burden. وَمَا جَعَلَ عَلَيْكُمْ فِي الدِّينِ مِنْ حَرَجٍ.
Jazakallah khair, Shakir. Just a follow-up question about the zakah since we opened this topic. Dr. Owais, so just to review briefly, so we have to pay zakah on the net gain that we make on the retirement plan, but not on the original amount of money that was deducted originally for the year.
Not on the original, of course, again, if your intention is to keep this for long.
Most of us are doing the long-term through the employer of the hospitals, So we do
so then you pay 10% on the gain.
10%.
You have to pay 10% on the gain.
Is that, some people, what is the point of paying zakah, the 2.5% on the income itself? So
not 2.5%, 10% on the gain.
No. So, okay, we're done with the 10% for the gain, but do we have to pay zakah also for our net monthly income or annual income besides the one that we are investing?
What do you mean annual income?
So let's say I receive like $10,000 a month, for example, let's say, or like I make 200,000 a year. This is on top of what I'm already deducted and invested in the retirement plan. Am I paying zakah on the income?
So zakah is a wealth tax. It's not an income tax. So zakah is a tax on your wealth. So you have to count all the wealth that you have. Let's say you have, I don't know, money sitting in the bank, that's cash, liquid money. Let's say you have, I don't know, other things that count for wealth, other than the car that you use or the house that you live in. Let's say you have, 5 houses, or you have all kinds of other assets that at any time you can sell them. You have to pay zakah on all those. Right? So zakah is a wealth tax. You have to calculate your wealth total. The wealth the zakat that is tax, that is zakatable, the wealth that is tax zakatable, and you pay 2.5% of that. So that includes the money that you have in your bank account, the money you have in let's say you have a general brokerage account, that these are stocks that you intend to buy and sell them kind of without keeping them for a long period of time. You pay zakah on those. Let's say you have gold, for example, or silver or something. You pay zakah on that. it's a wealth tax. But then for your retirement accounts, that is part of your wealth, but it's zakat differently because you are using it as kind of a long-term asset and you pay 10% on the gain. So you're not paying it's not like an income tax, it's like a wealth tax.
Exactly. So we have 7 minutes left to close at 10 o'clock in Eastern time, 9 o'clock in Central time. Just quick housekeeping, points. Some of the brother Jalma Khair mentioned, put some links for good resources. The Sheikh Yasser Qadhi input about Islamic view of insurance in general. There are some links about some investment ideas. I'm recording the presentation. I suppose that I can email the link to those who registered. If you join by the link without registration, you may, I will try to work with the ICCM community, try to upload it to the YouTube channel of the Islamic Center of Central Missouri. And what else? There are a few also resources for you who are interested in this topic. If you listen to podcasts, there are plenty of, alhamdulillah, like Islamic finances, podcast. There is something, there's a podcast invested by Amana itself called Halal Money Matters, and they have like regular episodes. There is something called Halal Money Talk, and there is also the Azad Assets podcast as well. So these are resources. If you are interested in listening, you can go over these as well.
There were a few questions that some people asked in the chat. I'm looking at them now. So someone asked, can you explain the Mega Roth IRA again?
Yeah.
So that if you do like locums work, for example, you can do a self-employed plan or a self-employed 401k or 403b, for example, and you get to direct which assets you invest in. And then you can transfer that into your individual Roth IRA. So, and someone asked, can you transfer SEP retirement accounts to Roth IRA every year? If you are the one managing that SEP plan, self-employed plan, then you can request for something called an in-service distribution, and you can transfer it to your Roth IRA every year. Yeah. Let's see. Someone asked, is compound interest involved when investing in Roth IRA? So again, Roth IRA is you can invest in any kind of asset. So if we're talking, I mentioned the 8% gains for the stock market, the general stock market, that's not considered interest. That is considered gain of the market, right? So because they're not paying you a guaranteed 8% every year, they're paying you, you are earning gains based on what the companies do and all the assets that they have. So if you put your Roth IRA money into a savings account, then yeah, you're going to be getting interest on that, which you shouldn't do. But if you put it into, or if you put it in bonds, for example, then yeah, you're going to be getting interest returns. But if you put it in the stock market, or if you put it in the rental properties, for example, then those are like kind of, again, depending on what you choose from the stock market, those are more halal returns. Someone mentioned that there are clean investments, which are kind of relatively new, but these are like considered more ethical investments. So they look at the sustainability of the company as it relates to like the environmental impact, and they don't want they don't invest in companies that deal with like wars and military and those kind of things. Yeah, so yeah, you should definitely put your money in those rather than putting your money in like the defense contractors and the military industrial complex, or in like oil companies that are probably very environmentally unfriendly. You should put your money in like clean energy, like solar, wind, etc. Yeah, so you should, when you go through your 401k plan with your employer, you should look and see what assets are being invested or what choices you have, because your choices are limited based on what your employer chooses, and so you can choose the one that is kind of closest to halal investments. Someone asked if there's any zakat on the house value. I mean, if you live in your house, then you don't pay zakat on your house. I think that's right. Bob, do you have any comments on that?
Yes, if you if you live in a house, if you have a car or 5 cars, depending upon how many in the house, you have equipment. If you are a technician, you have equipment. There is nothing, no zakah on any of these things. And from that, I could elaborate. I don't know how much time we have, but I would rather maybe answer the question of Dr. Assam Al-Ra'i. If you have an income, a gross income of 200,000, and you pay Uncle Sam the taxes due, and you spend on your family, so, and you end up with saving per year 50,000. You pay zakah on the 50,000, 2.5%. But if you have invested
50,000, if that's all your
that
assets,
is the saving.
savings that you have.
That is the
period.
saving, yes.
Not
That is the
per
saving.
year. Not per year. Like the next year, you have an additional 50,000.
Yes, it
then
is
you have to pay
accumulated.
on the 100.
Yes, absolutely. It is accumulated.
Accumulate.
Yes. If you, that's why Islam encourages people to invest in the market. That's why the economy will flourish. If everyone keeps the money in the house under the pillow, then the economy will not flourish. So it is encouraged that you invest your money. But suppose that you kept 50,000 until next year, you add the new saving into the previous year saving, and you make zakah again on the new 50. This is the 2.5%, and another 2.5% because you already paid last year, but you have to pay it this year also. So it is not per year, it is for what you have of accumulated, money with the gold and silver. But that is different from investing in the stock market. That's why it is 10%, because there it is, as I said, they draw it parallel to the cultivated land with the rain. That's why you pay 10%. There are more than one opinion about how to really pay zakah on your stocks. There is the most conservative way is to just multiply the whole value of the stocks 2.5%, but that is not really, if you study the situation, this is not realistic, because you invest, for example, in Apple. Apple has capital investment. Not the $2,000 billion or $2 trillion is cash. The bulk of it, 60% of it, are factories, and the factories you do not pay zakah. So you are a stockholder, you are a shareholder with that company that owns 60% machinery, just like the house you are living in or the car that you drive for your daily work. So this you do not pay tax in it. The same thing, the 60% of the value of Apple, there is no zakah on it. I'm sorry, I'm using the zakah and tax exchangeably. So you pay zakah for the 40% of your stock. This is another conservative way. The one that Owais mentioned is you pay on the gain, because you are like renting, as if you have bought a property and you rented. This is the revenue, or this is the gain. So you pay 10% on the gain rather than 2.5% of the 40%. If you have more questions, really we can entertain. No, but I hope maybe when Owais is in town, we can squeeze him into another session.
Yeah, I think we need another session for zakah only. This is a very broad topic, and I can sense from the level of interest and participation that this is really an important topic, and many of us really lack the knowledge. And I really thank Dr. Owais for his time and to share this information. I want just to conclude before closing the session. We passed 10, but let's say I am brand new for all this topic, and I was convinced by the presentation that I want to go ahead and invest according to your presentation. what will be the first step I should take after this? Where should I go?
So if you don't have an account with, probably the two biggest ones are probably either Fidelity or Vanguard.
Yeah.
Let's say you want to open a Roth IRA, for example, or one of those accounts, then just open an account with one of those companies, and you can open like a Roth IRA with one of those companies, and then you can put the money in. And you have until the tax filing deadline of this year to put money for last year. So you have until April, 12 or whatever it is, to put $6,000 to count it towards 2021. And then you can put an additional $6,000 for 2022. So, if you want to take advantage of that. But again, you have to keep in mind, if your income is more than 200-something thousand, you cannot directly put money into a Roth. You have to put it into an individual traditional IRA, and then you will do a backdoor Roth. You will convert it to the Roth.
Barakallah fikum. Thank you so much for, again, this valuable presentation, and thank you all for your time and effort and staying with us. Again, the link will be sent to you, and you can feel free to share it with others. And also, if you check the YouTube channel of the Islamic Center of Columbia, Missouri, the ICCM, you may find the presentation as well. Jazakumullah khair all, and have a good night, and see you hopefully.
جزاكم الله خير. سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك نشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت نستغفرك ونتوب إليك. والعصر إن الإنسان لفي خسر إلا الذين آمنوا وعملوا الصالحات وتواصوا بالحق وتواصوا بالصبر. جزاكم الله خيرا.